Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Gray Matter podcast. Very excited. We have another wonderful, interesting guest. We're going to have a very thought-provoking discussion today about freedom of expression and the media, and also censorship and why it's happening. Before we get there, once again, I'm decked out in spiritual gangster clothing, sponsored by Pure Athletics. So I'm grateful to them, to our sponsor, for allowing all of this to happen. So our guest today is Heather Prosak. She is well known to people in Calgary as a radio broadcaster. She's been broadcasting for more than 20 years, and we're going to get to know her a little bit better, I hope, today, and embarrass her going into some of her personal antecedents and her career and so on. But mainly we're going to talk about a recent experience she had with the Freedom Convoy. It's a wonderful story of courage and integrity and hope. She's a great example to all of us who really think it's important to stand up for the principles that we believe in, even when that comes at great personal cost. So as we always do, we're going to start off today by framing our discussion in terms of a couple of quotations. And because we have a lady on the show today, I picked one from a lady, Harriet Beecher Stowe, who's famous for having written a novel called Uncle Tom's Cabin. She famously said, "All serious daring starts from within." And boy, does that apply to this lady today. Also, another one from Napoleon Bonaparte, who once famously wrote that 4 hostile newspapers are more to be feared than an army of 1,000 bayonets. So here we have Calgarian radio host Heather Prosak, who made waves recently by filming and publishing an online video, which we're going to show you in a moment, about the Freedom Convoy. In this piece, she walks around Ottawa in a jacket and toque saying, "I haven't been this happy in 2 years." While speaking, Parliament buildings come into view, poetically disclosing the context of her commentary. And she says, Heather, like other broadcasters who she's going to talk about a little bit, she boasts 2 decades of experience as a media personality. And she's also been a program director of a radio station. She says, "I would normally have talked about something like this. I would normally have posted about something like this, and that's why you're getting this live." So let's go to cut 1, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
I talked to a few of my friends. The number one question was, have you seen any of those flags? No. This is the least racist place I've ever been in. Oh my gosh, you've got everybody hugging and saying, "I love you." I'm a very curious person. That's what got me here in the first place. And then I felt like I couldn't say anything. But I've been in radio 20 years. And I would normally have talked about something like this. I would normally have posted about something like this. And that's why you're getting this live.
So, spoiler alert, I'm going to tell you and let the cat out of the bag in case you don't know. Heather got fired over this. And we're going to talk to her about that. We're going to talk about why that happened, what that means for the media and for Canada and for freedom of expression. But obviously, what you see in the video is a very intelligent, curious journalist who's there to report on perhaps the singular most important media event of our lifetimes in Canada. And yet her courageous reporting of that, which was not done at the instance of her employer, was suppressed and censored, and she was punished for doing it. So before we go deeper into that, let's introduce our guest. Hello, Heather. Thanks for being with us on Gray Matter today.
Thank you for having me. Can I just say I love the opening? I love it.
Oh, great. Well, okay, we may as well tell the people. Heather has had some major involvement in production of the show, and we're so grateful to her for her knowledge and expertise and brilliance in this regard. So, yes, Heather, you did a wonderful job helping us with the show. Thank you.
No, I love it. Every time I hear it, in all seriousness, I just love the opening of it. No,
All
thanks
right.
for having me, Leighton.
Well, thanks. No, we're happy to have you. What I'd like to do, Heather, I know many you have a large following because you've been in broadcasting for a long time and been very successful at it. But some of the people who are our listeners don't know you, so I'd like to take some time to get to know you a little bit better. So obviously, you've been in broadcasting for a long time, but would you mind taking us back, not so far back, because you're a young woman,
Thank you.
but far enough back so we can understand where you're from and where you went to school and your family background and things like that, how you got into broadcasting. Can you give us a bit of a thumbnail sketch of where you're from and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, so I'm from a rural Manitoba. I grew up in a small town, and I used to just sing and play basketball and all these things. And then I decided one day when I graduated, I am really good at talking. Let's try this radio route. So from there, at 19, I move out of the house, and I start my trek across the prairies. Actually, I have now worked in Winnipeg, Regina, some small towns sprinkled in between as well, and then landed here in Calgary. So I love the prairies. I love prairie people, but I got a really good indication through my broadcast career, because what ended up happening was, not only was I on the air, but then I started to get into the business end of it. And much like any field, sometimes those positions start to get smaller and dwindle, and you start taking on more jobs. So I knew that if I liked this business aspect and I didn't want to give up the on air, maybe I could do both. And that's what I did. So for about eight years, I did program director and did morning show for majority of my career. So I was very lucky to be doing the morning show, because it's a coveted position. It's hard work, but I loved every minute of it. I got to meet people, talk to people, share insights into the world we live in, and also get into, when I first got into the industry, got into situations where you learned that to be successful, you should have two sides. You have one side, you have the other side, and that makes a compelling show. And so I loved that. I love the idea that I could come on the air every day, not agree with my co-host, but both sides are going to be represented. So that's a little bit about me. I came here in 2017 to Calgary and loved the city, was program director again, doing morning show, and then COVID hit and changed everything.
Hmm. But not
Yeah.
you. Every didn't change you though.
No.
And that's kind of what we're talking about today. I know I give these episodes little titles. Heather, I hope you're not offended by this. I've called this one The Journalist, because in talking to you, I know that you take this, and you talk about this in your famous posts, actually, from the Freedom Convoy. You take the relationship between yourself, the relationship of trust between yourself and the people who are listening to you, very seriously. And so you're not just a broadcaster, you're not just a mouthpiece, you're a journalist. And really, what we're going to get into is an example of how suddenly, perhaps not suddenly, but in the Canadian context, in the Western context, these two things seem to be in conflict.
Hmm.
Being a broadcaster is not necessarily being a journalist, and the subtle distinction is perhaps where you got caught. You got caught in between that. You were kind of between the devil and the deep blue sea. You went there thinking, well, I'm going to report the truth. And you found out that and you were going to report the truth as a journalist, but you found out that the broadcaster didn't necessarily want you to do that. Right? Did you agree? Is that a fair?
I, I would agree. I went there. Curiosity brought me there, and to realize that there was one side of the position that would be heard and could be heard, whether it be on social media, whether it be on the air. But the side of mine, for some reason, was bad and it was wrong. And I was deemed incorrect in what I saw. And I didn't see that. That was actually, Leighton, probably the scariest part for me. The video was about what I saw, and that was wrong, but I saw it. So how are you telling me that I'm wrong? Whereas The people in my industry that have opinions about this convoy, they're right. They didn't go to the convoy. They didn't see the convoy. They're sharing their opinion. Again, that's okay. Me being there, sharing what I saw over 5 days and talking to as many people as I could, that was wrong. That's what I couldn't get my head wrapped around.
Okay. Well, we've been teasing people with what you said, and because it's been suppressed, a lot of people haven't seen this. So, Devin, would you mind playing the second cut from Heather's now famous, notorious, infamous posting from the Freedom Convoy?
I met a trucker from Quebec. He said, I lost my job. I'm here for my children. And my neighbor said, I know you can't afford to pay your mortgage, but I'm going to pay it for you because you're in this convoy right now. And this trucker said to me, I tried to give a homeless man some money that was donated to me from the families that came through. And he goes, the homeless man said, no, I don't want it. You're fighting for my freedom. Because when does that ever happen? Oh, there were such great stories from there.
That's a poignant moment. So let's back up a step here, because I'm curious to know. Obviously, you're well ensconced, or you were well ensconced in your position in Calgary. Very successful radio personality. You're also involved in programming, basically an executive there. Comfortable life, but somehow, some way, you get it into your head that you must go. You must be a part of this event. So I'm curious, and I expect that the people listening to this are curious. What was the impetus? What made you? How did you get this idea to go there? What drew you to Ottawa? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I didn't know anything about the convoy until it hit Calgary. I had heard, so the rumbling started getting louder. And I actually wanted to meet them in Calgary, but they got in too late because I did a morning show. So I thought, that sucks. I can't do that. Okay, now what? But the emotion tied to it, and after I researched the specific pages that involved the Freedom Convoy and got to know their live streams and see some of the people behind the scenes, I realized these are really good people with some passion and some beliefs. And I love people with passion and beliefs, and they're standing up when things aren't making sense. And so Thursday morning, I had already had time off. Of all things, I had booked time off before even knowing about the convoy. Thursday morning, after seeing some really terrible and judgmental comments on social media, and then, within the broadcast industry that I worked in, seeing some of my colleagues talking about it negatively, I was like, forget it. This is ridiculous. People are arguing with each other about what they think this is. You know how you solve that? You go there. And that was it. So I tried to get a hotel room, got that done. Here's a great story. So I called the hotel I was staying at, and last minute, I heard that they were getting rid of hotel rooms after you book them. So I get to the front desk. I asked the woman, is this happening? She goes, no, you're booked. You're fine. And I said, is it safe for me to go there? And she goes, oh, it's so safe. She goes, these people are so wonderful. It is the biggest protest I've ever seen in my life, but also the nicest. And I'm 50 years old and I've worked here. And that's when I knew I had to go, because there is a massive discrepancy with the stories I'm hearing.
So, having said that, I'm going to play one of the clips from your sojourn there in a minute. But I'm curious about this. Based on what you just said, you went there with an open mind, right? But you must have had an idea of what you were going to find there, or you had an idea that what you were going to find there was different than what people were saying about it on social media, the way you described. Is that fair?
It is fair, because I was seeing live feeds and they were saying one thing. And I was also trying to take into account, okay, these are people that believe in it. So they might be sharing a certain part of it that they're not sharing the other side. But then I knew what I was seeing around me and hearing around me from my industry. That's where there was no middle ground, and that concerned me the most. So yeah, I could see that, I was hopeful it was going to be okay, but you never know until you're there.
Okay. Let's watch the third clip, and then I'm going to ask you a bunch more questions about this. This is very interesting. Go ahead, Devin. Could you play?
Part of this lie was because I just needed to feel a little more free with how I felt. And I was tired of being quiet about everything and holding a line that I didn't know what I was holding it for. Because if I started talking about, whatever topics in radio we love to talk about, that makes you forget about what's going on in the world. And normally I'm all about that. I think positive is good, but this is positive. And for me to be able to stand here and say that I always look at things glass half full and then not tell you about this convoy is going against everything I believe in. These men and women are in their trucks because they believe in something. And if you haven't been here, or if you go to a certain source and that's your information, it's great. I just ask that you talk to more people. Open up how you get your information.
So, Heather, that clip to me, it conveys a lot of emotion. One of the emotions that comes through is a relief, a sense of relief. It's almost there's an exhale. Yeah. There's a sense of exhilaration, and a sense of joy. So having said that, to preface that, you talk in that clip about having to remain silent for two years. So can we go back a little bit to, let's say, the onset of the pandemic, back to February, March of 2020, because I think this sets up very well your situation and how things developed. And perhaps, if you wouldn't mind, let us know what was going on in terms of, the COVID policy at the radio, and also the vaccine mandate policy to which you're exposed. Could you maybe give us some expository information about that?
Yeah. So, you give benefit of the doubt. When it started, it was just like everyone went into a situation where you don't know what it is. So March happens. And then as you get into summertime, there isn't a lot of communication. It's not like they're telling you to say certain things. But as it stands, there is a line that you toe. And the line you toe is usually along with what the masses are saying. And in this case, it was what the government was saying. So get vaccinated. You don't have any special information on it. You're just sharing what you're told. And by what you're told, what you're seeing in other news outlets, you're just grabbing the information, right? So as it continues going on, now policies of vaccinations begin. And that was interesting for me because I started hearing different companies, not the one I was working for at that time, but different companies putting in a mandated vaccine policy. And I'm thinking, what is happening right now? This is incredible. But also more so to the fact that once the government started talking about federally regulated companies, TV and radio stood underneath that. So now you've got a situation where there are people that are unvaccinated that you realize are going to lose their jobs, possibly. And you're hoping your company is not going to follow suit. But like it is in the industry, they follow each other. That's just what they do. So by the time 2021 rolled around, I had questions. But what I very quickly learned was that you had to be careful. You had to be careful what you said. You had to be careful how you said it. The words, you have to get ahead of the narrative with certain things. If you didn't agree with everything, it was almost like this whole COVID vaccination lockdowns. If you didn't really agree with it, you should be quiet. because they're going to look at you like you're a little different. And it could actually, no one said it, but it could actually affect how you do within the industry. And that was a very clear outline for me, that I knew the people that I worked with could say really negative things about people in the convoy that they didn't know, could say really terrible things about unvaccinated people. But don't you dare say anything on the other side of that, or ask the question, or say, hey, everybody just calm down. Like, let's all just take a break. Let's just do some research. You can wait. Don't feel anxious, because that's what I was feeling from listeners. When there was vaccination talk on the air, you should have seen, Leighton, how many people would text in anger telling us stop. It was too much.
Mm-hmm. So we should maybe explain that the company, the Uber company that owns the radio station that you work for, is one of the largest corporate broadcasting conglomerates in Canada. They're called Stingray. Did you know that they were sort of the corporate Uber bosses of the radio station at the time? Did you have a sense of that?
No, I didn't. Like, I truly thought, based on my experience, based on how rational of a person I am, I thought my experience was actually going to open doors, because, again, in my industry, you're always going to win when you have two sides, and you have two sides reflected, because then everybody is heard. I didn't for once think that there would be this ultimatum. I didn't once think that they'd say, just take it down. I thought they'd be like, what were you thinking? Tell us. And then I had this great, amazing, we call them bit that I couldn't wait to share. And it was going to also allow the other side to speak. But that wasn't the case. Yeah. So it was a surprise.
This is fascinating what you just said, because in our previous conversations, we've had this sort of running motif or theme of freedom of expression. And what you just said really struck me and reminded me of the conversation I had with Dr. Jay Bhattacharya. And in that context, in the previous podcast on this program, we were talking about science and freedom of expression in science. And what you just said, you could overlay that on top of what Dr. Bhattacharya said. Dr. Bhattacharya, he was quoting Sir Isaac Newton, who I don't think can be described as anyone's fool. And Dr. Newton, Sir Isaac Newton, he describes science as a conversation across time, during which there is this free debate of ideas that come together, and it's through that conversation that we arrive at the best ideas, and also at the truth. And that seems to apply also to journalism and broadcasting, doesn't it?
It really does. And I don't know at what point it changed, but leading up to the convoy, I had some conversations with friends, colleagues that were also journalists. And I asked them, why are they taking that story and why are they doing the story? And they're like, well, it's the story. And I'm like, no, but you're not researching it. I don't understand why you're not finding out the information. So there seems to be a major issue that if you're not towing a certain line, then you're incorrect and you need to be quiet. And I don't know where conversations and understanding, like, that's why I created my Knowledge Media podcast, was because I'm not trying to be right here, and I'm not trying to push my opinions on anyone, but I want to get to a point where we can talk again, we can understand each other, and we can say, hey, I disagree with you, Leighton. I'm good with that. And then we just carry on. What happened to that?
Well, that's a great question. I was hoping you could answer that for me. But perhaps we can talk about when you started to notice a change in media, because you said you've been over 2 decades now, and it seems as though this sort of woke approach to media became really more noticeable than ever in the context of COVID. But it probably started much earlier. But I have to remark, this must have been extremely difficult for you, being silenced, because you've told us that as a 19-year-old young woman, you went into broadcasting because you like to talk, you like to express yourself, express ideas. So this idea of being silenced, that must have been very, very difficult for you to endure during that COVID period. Can you describe that and how that made you feel?
I don't know if I can ever, number one, I never want to go back to that again. The best way I can describe it is, the movie I Am Legend with Will Smith. And the whole idea is that he's alone on the earth or in this city, him
Right.
and a dog, and everyone else is gone. That is how I felt through much of the pandemic, because I knew there were extremes going on and I was working with extreme people. And I just felt like I was the only one that had a rationale that I wanted to get on the air and say, everyone just calm down. Like take a break. Go out and enjoy your life for a minute and turn everything off. That's what I wanted to say. Where did I see it changing? Back to that question. I think I have to honestly say that there is never going to be a point in time that I'm going to be able to see it, because it just crept in and crept in, crept in. And it took something like a pandemic to expose how far gone we were.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it would be in little ways, and you can tell with what you listen to or watch, because it's when you're hearing one side of the narrative, it's not that there's not another side. It's they don't want to share the other side. To what degree is it a bias? Well, we're human beings. We're going to have biases. No, I don't care what kind of journalist you are. I know journalists like to say, well, no, I don't have a bias. You're a human being. You come from experiences. So I think that the reality is that the industry has gotten away with a lot, but I think there's the government issues. CRTC is a very big player in this game. And that's an arm of the government. So when someone says, well, the government's involved, it absolutely is involved. They don't come down with an email. So I want to clear that up. There's not there's an email that comes from the prime minister or anything like that. But the CRTC, if you're not familiar with them, if I say something on the air that listeners disagree with in such a huge way, they can go to the CRTC and complain. Now, it is there to, if there is some extreme swearing or some judgments towards other cultures or ethnicities, it is there for that. But if you really do some research into what the CRTC is, I encourage you to do it, to just find out what exactly they do, because sometimes it's all you need to find out is that they are an arm of the government.
Right. That movie you mentioned, I do like that movie.
I hated it. It was like a
it is
horror movie.
It is a remake, though. Did you know it's a remake?
No.
It's a remake of a 1971 film starring Charlton Heston. If you know who Charlton Heston was.
Yes, I do.
It's called The Omega Man. So if you liked I Am Legend, watch The Omega. I think you can watch it for free on YouTube. Anyway, more importantly, CRTC.
Yes.
I hope that people who are watching this or listening to this are aware that the Canadian government is in the process of passing legislation that would hand over control over the internet. That is, programs like your fine podcast, and this one would hand it over to the CRTC. So the government would be the sole arbiter, the sole decision maker of what is quote unquote appropriate content. That's very, very frightening, isn't it?
Incredibly. So if you look at, I'll take into account, because I did radio with music, 40%, some are 41% Canadian content. So how does the bill affect you? Because a lot of people get confused with it. And I have to be honest, I never paid attention to bills until COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at Bill 11, I think it's Bill 11, right?
Yeah.
You look at something like that. So if I take my personal experience, there is a certain amount of Canadian music I have to play on the air every day, and it has to balance out at the end of the week. Even though we have the internet, which allows so much competition, that was once upon a time put in place for good reason, right? In the 60s and 70s, Canadian music didn't get played as much as American music, but now it's a totally different game. I believe that's my opinion. So you take Bill 11 and you take the internet. That means this lovely word of the algorithm. That means the big broadcasting companies will absolutely be prioritized, which means they're the first information you're going to see. And these podcasts and other information that you might follow in other websites, you're not going to see them as much. You might not see them at all. Like, it's going to be interesting if this does go through.
So I want to come back to you, though. So you made a decision you were going to go to Ottawa, but and I think you've told us why you didn't tell your employer. But did you have any idea that that if you went there and did what you did, and just, yes, you made some editorial comment about what was going on, you provided some narrative description, but did you think for a moment that that would cause you to lose your job before you went?
No. I was on holidays, so that was my number one. And number two, I was never going to put it on the station page because that's a respect thing. That's not mine. I was going to talk to them about it. Like, I thought I was going to get back and I was going to say, hey, take a look at this video a little more clearly. What about sharing parts of it? That was what I thought could happen. But after doing the video, I still didn't think that it would get to where it is now, where I was basically cleaning out my office. I just thought, based on my experience and what I've done in the industry, that they'd be like, you know what? There's a way to make this work, because you can make anything work. It's radio, it's talking. I didn't need to get political about anything. In fact, the video wasn't political. So that's why I thought that I would be fine, because it was what I saw, not what I thought, not my opinion, just what I saw, my experience. And so that's where it got scary for me when that ultimatum came in, because what they were saying is that my experience was wrong. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to come back to that ultimatum. I want to follow that. Before we do that, I want to go to the next clip. Could you play the next one, please, Devin?
I'm a program director of a radio station, and they've been wonderful. And they don't know that I'm here. They do now. Hi, guys. Sorry, I couldn't hold on any longer. I couldn't do this. When the convoy hit Calgary, the amount of families and the children with posters, they came out early in the morning, and I'm like, oh, I wish I was there. So I followed along, breaking down, crying. I don't know if you did that, but you're not alone. So I'm going to flip this camera around for a second so you can...
Standing in unity right now. People from all walks of life, all genders, all races, all religions. It doesn't matter. They're all Canadians. And they're saying, we're Canadian, we're free, and we've had enough. And that's why we're all here, right?
That voice sounds like Chris Scott, who was a recent guest on our show.
And I didn't know that. That's funny, because I was like, I listened to your podcast with him, and I'm like, wait a second, I just connected the dots on who was on the stage.
Yeah, he's great. He also has a very wonderful podcast show of his own called The Chris and Carrie Show, which is just hilarious. People should take that in. But so let's talk about this a little bit. So you arrive there, obviously very moved by what you're seeing. Were you shocked? Were you surprised?
I was disappointed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was disappointed because the reality of my industry came hard down. Like, it rained hard on me.
Oh, okay. That disappointment. All right.
That disappointment. I was moved. I was hopeful. And I hadn't been hopeful in 2 years because it seemed like everyone had lost their mind, uh, to be honest. And
Mhm.
so here I was at this place. In the first minute and a half, uh, two Black women were on the stage talking about freedom. 5 minutes later, I was walking past a hockey game on the street in front of Parliament, and the donations were being taken for Every Child Matters. I'm like, I just found out this isn't racism in 5 minutes. So there was all this stuff that was coming to me through my experience at the convoy that there was no denying anything. There was no question marks for me. People were hugging, everybody was hugging, everyone was so friendly and happy. And then hearing the truckers' stories, you knew it was hard on them. They said, they're like, we just want to go home. Like that for me that was a huge one when you hear them saying, we just want to go home. We just don't understand why no one will talk to us. Like just talk. That was a big one.
There was also there seemed to be a sense of relief, and what I took that to be, and correct me if this is wrong, I interpreted that as your best hopes, your best suspicions about what our country was really like were confirmed or reaffirmed for yourself. Because, of course, you and I grew up in Canada, different Canada than what we're seeing today, sadly. And it sounds to me like what you saw there was more like the Canada that you know, the country that you love, that you're proud to be a part of. And I sense that there was a relief that, wow, it's still here. It's not gone. We really aren't systemically racist. We really aren't evil, right? We really
Yes.
aren't bad people. We're still this kind of country. Is that did I get that right?
Yeah. And it was the relief that what I had hoped it was going to be, it was. And when does that ever happen? And and it was weighing on me not saying anything. I felt like I was doing the wrong thing by not sharing what I saw. I actually felt like by not saying anything, I would be just as bad as if I had lied about something. And I can't explain that any more to you than that. It was just like a dark feeling. If you walk away, you're not living out who you are, how you were raised. I'm an honest, truthful person. I had to share it. So, what you were also getting, Leighton, was a relief of truth when truth comes out, right? That lightness.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That answers one of the questions I had because I mean, obviously, you strike us as a pretty smart lady,
Well, thank
and
you.
the smartest thing that you could have done would be to go there and observe, perhaps even record it on your phone,
Hmm.
and then take it back to Calgary and maybe show it to a couple of trusted people at the radio station. Say, hey, I got this footage from the Freedom Convoy. What do you think about showing this on air or broadcasting this or whatever? But you didn't, and you've told us why now, because you really felt compelled, you were moved, and the emotion that you were feeling there was very, very, very palpable. But did I know I asked you this before in another way, but um, were you just so taken up by it that you didn't consider the risk? You just went ahead and you said, well, this is the truth. I'm a journalist. I have to show this. I have to reveal this right now, because obviously there was a conscious decision to record that and then post it to Facebook, right?
Yeah, I did. Well, I did it live, so there was no
Yeah.
takebacks.
Yeah.
But I did it live. I don't know why I went live, to be honest. I just was so moved. I was so taken with all of these people, but most importantly, to see the level, no, to see how Canada actually is versus what was happening over the last 2 years and what I was hearing and witnessing. But seeing my Canada in Ottawa there, those are the people, those are the Canadians I know. That's who we are. We're cleaning up after each other while protesting. We're
Mhm.
shoveling snow or throwing garbage out. So did like, I never once thought, oh, this is going to go bad for me.
Mhm.
I actually thought, I'm going to share this and people are going to be like, oh, Heather is grounded. So maybe I should go to, I really thought, and maybe that's probably very naive of me now that I look back. I actually thought that it would possibly change some minds of people who
Mhm.
had made a decision based on no facts and no evidence.
Well, if it's any consolation, it's my experience that the most honest people also tend to be the most naive and gullible.
Thanks. Okay.
Because because they tend to want to see the best in other people,
Yeah.
right? And but anyway, but then you come back and you're made to face a firing squad, weren't you? You come back and all of a sudden it's um, you know you're faced with an ultimatum, which was what? Can you explain that?
Yeah. So I had an option to take the video down and work to repair damaged relationships caused by my video being up and staying up for the length of time it was up, which at that point was a week, or take the video down and be terminated with cause.
Yeah,
So
so that must have been very, very shocking
I was
to
like,
say
oh,
the least.
wait. So they don't want to talk about this?
Mhm.
Oh, my bad. Um, so leading up to that, they wanted me to take the video down. And I said to them, well, let's discuss this, because I still was trusting that these people that I knew and worked with, um, that they'll want to talk and communicate and understand where I was coming from. And we will mutually maybe agree to disagree, but they'll go, you know what, you got a point. There's a lot of people that agree with you. Let's see what happens on the air. But that's not what happened at all. And the choice was put out there. I was very confused about how that line of work to repair damaged relationships caused by a video being up, a video of stuff that I saw. For the last 2 years, I've had to listen to people share their opinions that may have been a little bit different than mine, but I couldn't challenge them on that. Yet they could challenge me on what I saw in a video and then say that I hurt people. It just, honestly, I don't know where you even take that, because it's confusing to me. And maybe with you and your legal background, you can understand
Hmm.
this, but I can't. I couldn't. I kept saying, I don't understand to them. I don't understand. And they couldn't explain it either.
Well, the irony seems to be that what you were offering was not even necessarily an opinion. It was really more in the nature of a documentary, wasn't it? That's what you were doing. You were documenting,
Yeah.
right? So people can form their own opinions about that. You make that clear in the way you presented the material. But having said that, there's another question that is
Go
very
for it.
intriguing. So, as you know, sadly, many other people in your industry, let's call it entertainment and media, many other people have been similarly situated, where they have posted things or said things or done things that they regretted, and given the opportunity, they back down. Of course, the most obvious one, of course, is poor Will Smith and this lap heard around the world, where he issues an apology and now he's suspended from the academy for 10 years. But he didn't, he didn't make the stand that you did.
Yeah.
And you could have said, and you were offered, I understand, repeatedly, the opportunity
Mhm.
to take the it down, and you would have been able to keep your job and carry on, right?
Yeah.
Um, but you didn't take the knee. You didn't genuflect to the big media company. And so my question is, why and how did you find the courage and the strength to do that?
Well, that is a very loaded question. So let's see.
I'm trying to make some of them hard. They can't be all softballs.
Really like going through this. This is just coffee talk with
I
Leighton.
mean, you're not Joe Biden, right? I gotta give you a few ones that you can
I
actually grapple with there.
Yeah, that's a big one. Okay, so I felt like while I was going through the pandemic, I felt that I had been. Um, I think I've mentioned a few times. I think I'm a rational person. I really hone in on being strong with common sense, and I know there's always two sides to every story. But something went away over the pandemic, and the fear started to rise. And yes, is the pandemic real? Sure, it is. But the fear was also just as real. And so going through the 2 years of that and then going to the convoy and being able to share this side of it, it was the first time that I felt at peace with what I had done, what I had spoke about. And that level of peace you can never, ever, like that level of peace I'll never give up. That peace is how I make my decisions. That peace is how I decide who I'm going to spend time with or what job I'm going to take. Uh, but after I did that video, the amount of peace made me realize I did the right thing. I did the right thing. Was it for my career? Maybe not. But I truly felt like I did the right thing. So having the choice to take it down was definitely there. But then the thousands of messages came in from around the world, Leighton. People didn't like that. So it was shared 500,000 times on YouTube.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Incredible. And that's not taking TikTok into it. That's not taking mine. People started taking it and sharing it. So I knew it was out of my hands at that point. But people had messaged me and a lot of them would say in the darkness of your DMs, I'm messaging you because I can't like your video. I don't want people to see that I've liked it. But I knew that convoy was good, or I've been feeling what you've been feeling. So to take that down meant to me that I was saying I lied. To me, it said that even though I saw what I saw and I shared what I shared, I'm going to take it down because it was wrong, and it wasn't wrong. So there's this whole moral integrity, all of this stuff coming up that I'm like, well, I guess we'll see what happens. I'm a good person. They know I'm a good person. So why wouldn't they want to keep me on the team and we just navigate this like we navigate other problems in our industry?
So, in the aftermath of this, um, you would not apologize, you would not capitulate, you would not take it down, and so they decided to dismiss you for cause, right?
Mm-hmm.
Essentially for insubordination, right? Not doing what you were told,
I,
not being a good little journalist.
yeah.
You must obey, right? You didn't do that, and so they dismissed you. That's hard. That's hard to accept, isn't it?
Insubordination. Like you have to understand what kind of person I am and what kind of person I've been in the career. I'm a company person. So I toe the line and I get the job done. And to see insubordination on there was, yeah, it was tough to see
Yeah,
because
you're a
that's not
basketball
who I am.
player. You're a team player.
Yeah. Work
Yeah.
together. Let's get those ratings up. Let's see what we can do. But not at the expense of lying and not at the expense of losing that peace that I knew was right.
Yeah. There's an interesting parallel here. As you know, um, I've been spending a lot of my time recently when I'm not talking to Dr. Hinshaw, representing people um, who have been impacted, have lost their jobs because of vaccine mandates.
Ah,
And there's a whole gamut of emotions that run through that experience for Canadian workers.
mm-hmm.
But if I was going to put one word on it that would summarize it all, it's dehumanization.
Absolutely.
And this is kind of what happened to you in the same way. And so these workers, the experience they have is that um, they all came to a certain job with a certain level of knowledge, experience, training, education. They're plucked from a group of candidates. They're picked for the team. And then over a period of months or years, or even decades, they apply all their skill, all their craft, all their dedication, late nights, weekends,
Mhm.
missing birthday parties and anniversaries and so on for the good of this company. And along comes the company and they say, yeah, we've got this thing now, vaccine mandate. And the truth is we really don't care about you. We don't
Hmm.
care what you can do. We don't care what you've done. The only thing we want from you is compliance. So stick
Mhm.
out your arm.
Mhm.
And this is kind of what happened to you. You gave you all of your knowledge, all of your experience, all of your great work as a broadcaster and as a programmer. Um, you thought that this company valued you as a person.
Hmm.
And then they come along and they say, well, Heather, we actually don't value that very much. In fact, we don't value that at all. We just want you to do what we're telling you to do. And we want you to express not your values, but our values or lack thereof. And that's really all you can do. Otherwise, you can't work for us.
Right.
So would you agree that that sort of made you feel dehumanized?
Oh, absolutely. When you spend years somewhere and you're doing social media and you're on their website and you're, in commercials and promos as we call them, and the next day you are wiped. You're not even in existence. It happens a lot in our industry. So that's number one. It happens a lot. It's the entertainment industry. But for the reason that it happened to me, that was dehumanizing. That was shocking.
And yet, and it won't surprise people to learn this about you. You dealt with it very well. Um, First of all, you're not taking it. I understand that you've retained competent legal counsel,
I
and that there's
have
a lawsuit. There's a
really
lawsuit.
great counsel.
There's a lawsuit. There's a lawsuit pending. And
Yes,
so you're going to take this up. You're not going to take this, are you? You're gonna hold them to account. You're going to sue them for wrongful dismissal, right?
absolutely. It's the right thing to do. I disagree with what happened. Um, Again, it goes back to why can't we just agree to disagree? There was nothing wrong in what I did, and to be dismissed the way I was, yeah, you don't even feel like a human being.
Yeah. And the other thing you've done, and of course, this probably won't surprise people, even who didn't know you before, but just from listening to what you've said so far, you've turned the page.
Mhm.
Actually, you've more than turned the page. You've opened a new chapter in your life, and now you've got some very exciting new projects that you're working on. One of which is your own podcast, correct?
Yeah, I started
So tell us
a
about that, please.
well, I decided to start a company called Knowledge Media, and knowledge is truth. And with everything that happened, I thought, how perfect is that word based on what just happened to me? I was ousted for telling the truth. So let's get other people on that are honest, want to share insight, and get interesting guests on. Um, so my very first guest was Jamie Soleil, and we talked about her
Olympic
career.
champion, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. 2002, the Salt Lake City gold medal champion who had the major issue, right, with the Russians and the French judge. So she talks about actually her take on media being in the limelight, and it's quite interesting. So the guests are going to range from all walks of life. I think I might even get a certain lawyer on. Who knows?
I would be honored to appear on
Love
that
it.
program. I watched the first one. I thought it was just brilliant. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Well, I can't wait to have you on. So, in a way, what I want to do through knowledge media is get to a point where we're back to respecting opinions, respecting disagreeing with opinions, and being challenged. And that's something I said when I revealed it. I think it was only a week ago that I did this. I said, if you like to be challenged and you want to challenge people and their opinions, this is the place for you. It's a safe space. We should be able to do that. So we'll talk all kinds of things. We'll talk pandemic. We'll talk fun stuff. And it's going to be interesting.
Okay. Well, I know we've talked about you a lot so far, and I hope that hasn't made you uncomfortable.
Nah.
But what I'd like to do is maybe come up from that and maybe take a bit of a 5,000-foot view perspective on what we've been talking about, and maybe talk about what your situation means in a broader sense for the media. And you talked about a little bit earlier in the context of the CRTC, but I'm interested in talking about this sort of censorship of the internet and government control of media. This to me is a very shocking development, and it's sort of a many-headed beast. And you aren't the first, and you won't be the last to sort of lament the loss of an independent, of let's say the fifth estate in Canada. For example, Rex Murphy is one who I know has been very outspoken, one of Canada's foremost journalists. He still publishes occasionally on the National Post, but he's been very outspoken about what happened to him in his last days at the CBC.
Mm-hmm.
And when people like he left, that really that was the end of the CBC in terms of what it was in the Peter Mansbridge days. So talking about this woke culture in media, I guess my main question for you as somebody who's an insider, where do you see this leading? And is there any hope to stop this rampage, this sort of infestation of the media, so that we can get back to a state of affairs where at least we have journalists like yourself who are free to record and report and broadcast to the public truth in media?
Where does it go? So right now there's a lot to be said about this one. Everyone calls it one narrative. And I think if we don't speak up, and I say we, listeners, viewers, if you don't speak up in a respectful way, calling out and being accountable, getting them to be accountable, and I'm talking about the broadcast industry as a whole, we're already down a dangerous slope. And we didn't notice it. And I think it was the pandemic that just brought it to huge light. Like, obviously there were examples of it, but this shone a new light on it. And with this bill and everything coming forward, like I said, in the past, in the industry I'm in, there are certain percentages of Canadian content that need to be on the air. Well, you immediately want to do the trusting thing and go, well, that's good. Rah, Team Canada. But it's not. It's a way to make certain stations, broadcasting places, do specific things that the government needs. And I believe it's covered in this CRTC umbrella. And so what happens is, if they come in on the internet, if you think you don't like the narrative happening now, imagine when you can't go to your website that you want to go and do the research on. Imagine the podcast you like listening to all of a sudden is just gone. That's the stuff that could happen. That's a reality.
So the demand for the type of content, for example, that you are producing has never been higher. We can agree. Podcasts are exploding. They're proliferating. And that's due in no small degree by the problem with mass media that you've been describing. The horrifying thing for me about, for example, the CBC and government sponsorship of outlets like that, and also outlets like Stingray, is that there doesn't seem to be any way to stop it. I'm not sure which has less viewership, the CBC or CNN, but it's very clear that these ratings are horrifyingly low, and yet the money just keeps pouring down into the volcano. Apart from consumer choices and choosing to support certain media over others, do you have any ideas about how people can conduct themselves in a way that will support podcasts like yours and other types of programming that are truthful and honest and have integrity?
What I'm noticing the most is the donations. And giving financially. You have to remember what's happening around you with your regular channels that you would have been listening to or watching. They're getting money too, but they get money partially from the government and then through client-based approaches, right? Sales. But if you like someone, you like watching them, you find them truthful, and you want to encourage that, financially helping them will help them do more of that. So that's the easiest thing. And I think that's the only thing, because as it stands right now, Leighton, if you look at how will the rest of the industry change as it goes mainstream media, that's a huge mountain to figure out. That is a huge, because you've got things of people that are hired that have certain beliefs. You've got the government involved in that. And I'm not saying anything that people don't know, but I don't think they realize that if they don't speak up or support the local trusted broadcasters, I'm going to call you a broadcaster now too, because you're speaking to people and getting information that we need to hear. And it's unfortunate that others call it disinformation,
Right.
because it's not.
The your story is one where obviously you were guided by a number of different things, different
Mhm.
ideas, values, principles, but one of those seems to be this concept of freedom of expression.
Yes.
Now, this may seem like an obvious question, but is it your view that there is within the media where you were working, for example, um, an organized and orchestrated plan to reduce or attack freedom of expression generally? In other words, by shutting down or controlling the flow of information that gets out to people, is that part of a broader plan that's designed to prevent discussion of ideas the way we are right now, right? Because as you know, I mean, it's obvious, it's very hard to have a meaningful discussion
Hmm.
unless you have information to talk about, and it's even harder to have a meaningful conversation if I have to be constantly worried about offending you or hurting your feelings.
Yes,
Sometimes we do have to sometimes we do have to offend each other to
exactly.
have a meaningful conversation. That's at the thrust of what debate is and how we get sort of good ideas. But I
Mhm.
guess, but to sum that up, do you believe that media is part of, let's say, a broader plan that's trying to shut down freedom of expression entirely, or is that
I
going too far?
It's not, but I think I wish it was that simple to say, yeah, that's the way it is. I know really good people that work in the industry. So I know some people are taking, periodically when I do these interviews, they're taking it personally. And I've had some conversations with people and they're like, how dare you? And I'm like, don't take it personal. Take it from, like, take yourself out and let's talk about the industry. So I wish it was as easy as saying that. There are so many layers to this. You've got people that are being hired that have certain biases. So you've got that, right? And they might be managing certain stations and corporations within. But you also have the government coming in, and there's those conversations from a bigger level. So it's not that easy to say that's what's happening. But I can say, as being a programmer of stations, you have an image in your mind of what you want that station to look like, sound like, and be like. And if people are falling off where your vision is, and everybody's vision is going to be different depending on who they are as a program director. So if your vision is different and someone is falling off that, that's where the conversation happens, and that's where someone might lose their job. That's when they might be, brought into the office going, "Hey, I noticed you're talking a lot about this. That's not who we are." Now, a really good example is this: if I run a music station and it's a pop station, and we want to be a feel-good station, we are not going to talk politics, but it's across the board. Nobody's talking politics. Okay, guys, that's what we're doing. It's positive only and it's upbeat only. I can get on board with that because that's an image. But what's happening now in media is like things are trickling out. Some people can have political opinions, other people are getting silenced for them. That's the problem.
Right. But there are some signs of hope, aren't there? For example, one of your colleagues, Mr. Carson, um, has taken a stance somewhat similar to yours.
Hmm.
And so there are signs of hope that that some people are willing to step out, let's say, step outside the narrative as you describe it. But there's great risk in doing that, isn't there? Because and also not only great risk but great harm
Right.
if they do it. They risk not only loss of job, they risk cancel culture attack and maybe being driven out of the industry entirely, having their reputations harmed. So it does take a lot of courage to do that, especially when you're talking about, really taking away someone's livelihood by destroying the platform, their platform, especially when you're a broadcaster. When you're a broadcaster, let's face it, you're a personality,
Hmm.
and that personality and the way that you've developed it is a marketable commodity. That's your stock in trade. Just as for a lawyer, that it's your reputation that you market to people. That's what makes people want to seek you out and hire you. So
Hmm.
there is great risk, and it seems to me. Would you agree that corporate media and, by implication, government are exerting this pressure? They're making it very clear to people like you, "Hey, don't you dare step out of line, because if you do, it's or else."
It's or else. Yeah. I think you just know when you're in the industry long enough, you get the feeling of the industry, you get the sense, you know who you're working for and maybe what their beliefs are. And you do. There's many examples of that. I think that stands with a lot of industries, but in media, because the microphone and the camera is so powerful, that's where it gets dangerous when you can't have both sides on it. So yeah, I do believe that there's that thing that when you're going through your career, and if you've had any length of time in it, there are certain things that could get you in trouble. Now, you hope for the best and you're thinking, because when, again, I think just to bring it back for what I said when I first started, the whole concept of media, when I first started in it, they would bring consultants in from around the world, and the consultants would say the same thing. We need both sides represented on the air. That means success. And I still believe in the fact that maybe we can get back there one day in the industry, but I think there's going to have to be a lot of cleaning and a lot of conversations before we do that. And I don't know how you even separate the government from it.
Yeah, there's an old adage that the left always goes too far,
Mhm.
and I think we're starting to see that. And in fact, you're a good example, because here there's another way that your employer could have played this that to me would have been so much better for them, and that is, okay, we've got this very accomplished person working for us. She's produced this incredible material. Let's broadcast it. Let's showcase it, and let's see what people think about it, and then we also keep her as a personality. And it's very strange to me that they would have turned their back. It's almost like in the old those old Hollywood movies, when there are so many reporters, and they're all going after the scoop, right?
Yeah.
And they're hanging around the police station. Well, who's in the sheriff's office today? We're gonna got a scoop. Well, here you got the scoop. Like, this is the
Yeah.
scoop of the 21st century in Canada, and you handed it to your employer, and they threw it away. And they not only threw you away, but the other thing that they did, I don't think they calculated, was they unleashed you, right?
Yeah.
They unchained Heather, and so now here you are, and so now you're not in their midst, being quiet and being careful to keep the job. Now you're unchained. You're Lady Hercules unchained, and now you can unleash all of your knowledge and talent and acumen and everything else into other types of endeavors that are not only going to compete with them, but are going to call the way that they do things into question, the way that you're doing right now. So it's really, really hard to understand. It's almost, you use the word rational. You're rational. I think
Mhm.
your employer was behaving completely irrationally. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely I agree. But I'm always this person, Leighton, that I take a step back and I always see both sides. And I don't know what that person, those people walked through. I don't know their experience. I just know that I would have taken a step back and really thought about it and went, no, we can make this happen. Let me talk to her. I'm gonna then Heather's gonna say, thousands of people have been messaging me. Okay, how do we make this work? Because there are two sides here.
Right.
And one side is being spoken for. She can come with the other side. In our industry, if you're getting hate mail, you're doing something right. And that's the reality. So you just would deal with it. Um, but you're right. I was shocked by it. It for me, it was a level of, um, yeah, it was irrational. I was just like, what just happened? And how is that the right thing to do here?
Well, you're obviously too fair-minded, diplomatic, and classy to say it. So I'm going to say it for
Thank
you. And I
you.
think many Calgarians are going to agree with me. They made a big mistake when they fired you. Okay. We'll just leave it there.
Thank you.
So we've taken up a bunch of your time here, and I'm very grateful for it. It's been wonderful talking with you. But we're now to the kind of the closing part of our show, kind of a fun thing that we do, and that is, we try and leave people with some idea or some source or some place where they can go to further their understanding of the kind of things that we've talked about.
Mhm.
And it can be a book or anything, a website or anything that you can refer them to help them, get a just kind of continue the discussion. Mine is a wonderful book that I read recently. It's called Woke Inc. It's by a very interesting guy named Vivek Ramaswamy, who is not only a Yale law grad, but he started a biotech firm, and he did very well. He's a self-made billionaire. He's an immigrant to the United States from India, but he wrote this wonderful book called Woke Inc.
Mhm.
And what he does is he talks about in that book, he talks about the modern woke industrial complex that divides us as a people. He's talking about the West by mixing morality with consumerism. America's elites prey on our innermost securities about who we really are. They sell us cheap social causes and skin deep identities to satisfy our hunger for a cause and our search for meaning, and a moment when we lack both. So I raised that book because it seems to me that that your employer was sort of reading out of this woke corporate playbook, and we've seen so much of this in the news. Of course, most recently with Disney, um,
Yes.
and but it seems to me that's sort of the playbook, and so this book, which I read recently, goes into some of the reasons why this is happening. And the shocking thing is, these big companies actually think that this virtue signaling is profitable. When it comes right down to it, they think that this stuff is profitable. It's going to make them money. And the theme of this book is that, and this kind of ties into what you were saying earlier about sort of voting with your dollars. That if we stop supporting companies who make these bad decisions, who are expressed values that we don't agree with, that's the best thing that we can do to stop this kind of virtue signaling and this
Mhm.
and enforcement. You're seeing this, for example, with Disney. Recently, they lost so many, I believe, 350,000 subscriptions in one day,
Yeah.
and their stock has lost $3.4 billion already. Now, that's a $100 billion company, so who knows if that impacts them? But if these guys think that this woke virtue signaling is making them money, it seems to me they've got another thing, coming. So to me, that's a book that kind of ties in with your experience, what you're going through. But anyway, that's my spin. What can you share with us? What do you have any ideas where you can point people to where they can go and learn more about media and corruption of the media?
You know what? I'm just going to point them to the website. If you Google Government of Canada CRTC, read through that, understand it. You're going to see regulations. You're going to. It's important to understand why they're there and what they do. because without the knowledge, you're not going to understand when things are going wrong, and you're not going to understand when you can speak up. So I would say that's the best place. And then knowledgemediacorp.com, which is my website.
Oh, wonderful. By the way, while we're on that topic, apart from your new your website and your podcast, are there other places where people can find you to access your content?
Yeah, you're going to be able to find us on everything, Apple, Spotify, wherever it is that you usually listen is where you can find it. And every Tuesday we come out with a new one, and hopefully we'll be able to increase that.
Brilliant. Well, I'm sure that the people who have followed you in Calgary for many years are relieved that you haven't disappeared,
Yes, I got a lot of their messages.
and that you're back. And you, as I said, you're unchanged.
Yes.
You're unchained. You're unleashed. You've
Yes.
unleashed the power of Heather.
Truth,
So
just truth.
yes. Anyway, we're very proud and pleased to have had you on the program today, Heather. Your story is one of great courage and integrity and honesty, and really, you've just carried yourself with such class throughout all of this. I don't think many people. I don't think there's anyone who could be critical of the way that you've conducted yourself. And you've just proven what Albert Einstein once famously wrote about the only three ways to influence other people. The first is example, the second is example, and the third is example. So thank you for being a fine example to all of us about how to deal with a difficult situation when your principles come headlong into conflict with the realities of life and the practical realities of life. And as I said, it's very it's wonderful to see someone who will stand up for their principles in the face of great risk, great adversity, and great cost. And you've done all that. And the best part is you've come out of it the other side.
Yes.
And you're better for the journey. And I wish you all the success in the world going forward. Thanks very much for your time today and for being our special guest on Gray Matter.
Thanks for having me.